everyone, today I'm going to be talking about a very atmospheric, slightly creepy, disturbing book, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I was kind of almost worried to read this book. I read the Shadow and Bones trilogy by Leigh Bardugo years ago, as it was released, and I just had kind of meh feelings about it. It was fine. I don't know, I liked the character of the Darkling. I thought he was very creepy, and but I almost wish, I don't know, when I read stories like that, I almost want more of a redemptive arc, and I don't think a lot of fantasy writers choose a redemptive arc. Not saying that I wanted Alina to end up with him, but I just wish at some point there would be a good redemptive arc. Anyway, so I was kind of torn about reading more of her work. But then I read the Six of Crows, and yeah, I enjoyed those books a lot more, and The King of Scars is also very good. So finally I have gotten to Ninth House, and this is her adult fantasy story. It's almost on the cusp of horror. But yeah, this is her adult work, and I did enjoy it. There's a lot of creepiness and disturbing factors to this book, but overall I thought it was very solid. So the book follows Alex Stern, whose real name is Galaxy. A lot of people do not know that. They would assume that her name is Alexandra, but no, her name is Galaxy, which I think is actually a pretty cool name. And she's a unique individual. She can actually see the grays, or as we would term them, ghosts. So she sees dead people. It does get a little bit beyond that as well. She not only sees dead people, she discovers actually that the dead souls can actually inhabit her body for at least periods of time and take control and kind of cause her to do things that she wouldn't necessarily do if she had full control of her body, which is horrific. At least in my opinion, that's kind of where the horror comes in for me. I think that's horrific. To have your body be possessed by something and do actions that you wouldn't do. So let's get down to it. So what happens here is that Alex ends up the sole survivor of this really horrific act, and I don't know, it's kind of suspect what happens around her. And she actually ends up recruited, in part because she can, no, actually it's mostly because she can see the grays. She ends up being recruited to this special house in Yale. Yale has their secret societies. This is actually known and actually a fact. And so she gets recruited to this one where she has this student and master, they're both students, but one's an upperclassman, relationship, where one is the Dante and the other is the Aristotle. So I'm the teacher, you're the learner, and then when I retire, you will take over this position and you will train the next in line. Which is all very interesting. She's sort of terrified about the whole thing because she doesn't feel that she fits into the Yale society. It wasn't really for her, so she's worried about, doing all these classes and the classwork and everything, but it's no, it's fine. So part of the story is just her getting into that role and meeting everybody. There are two narrations of the book. So the one is through Alex's perspective. The other is actually through the senior to her, Daniel Arlington, or Darlington as he's known throughout the story. And his narrative actually occurs, it's not a year, I don't think, but it's a different timeline. So his is before her current storyline. And so we see from his perspective meeting Alex, recruiting Alex, and then working with Alex. But a big part of it, we end up losing that narration because, possible spoiler alert here, during their observations of the other societies and what's happening and the mysterious death of a co-ed Tara and investigating that, throughout their investigation and everything that's happening, because there's so much that happens in this book. It's immense. I mean, just the whole story. It's not, the book isn't really that immense, but just the whole story and world is pretty big. In one of their, I don't know what you call it, a battle, I guess. Anyway, when they're doing their investigation, something happens to Darlington, and we're not really sure whether he is murdered, whether he's kidnapped, what happens, but he's essentially removed from the current picture and narrative, so we do lose his storyline along the way. His storyline will come in, what happened to him will actually most likely be seen in the next book. This is book 1 in a series, which with any luck, part 2 will be out next year. Maybe, nobody knows. But there's a lot to unpack in this story, because obviously there's the murder and who done it. There is the whole incident with Alex and what happened to those people. And a lot of these answers you will get throughout the narrative, but it's what happened in that horrific act that Alex was involved with. And what's going on with the Greys? Like, just why? And the Greys themselves send Alec on some missions to discover information. And then, of course, the whole secret societies, what's going on with them? And are they responsible for these other acts that are happening? Or is there someone else who's doing it? It's kind of a hard book to describe because there is literally so much going on. But it was also very engaging. I know that there were some times where I was kind of like, okay, wait. I would just pause for a minute and I would recollect my bearings about who is who and what of the story do I know so far, especially when it would flip between Darlington and Alex. I would just make sure I was still following the narrative a little. That's just me. A lot of people probably wouldn't have that, but sometimes I get a little spacey and I just have to remind myself for a minute about what's going on. But overall, I thought this story was pretty dang good. Yeah, it was fascinating to look at the secret societies, the bringing in of the occult. It was a good kind of spooky, but lightly spooky and creepy book, which I like to read around this time of year, is just having that little bit of spooky flavor. I am intrigued to see what will happen next, especially in regard to Darlington and what happened there. And Alex herself, she's an interesting character, and she's got a lot of spunk and a lot of bite. So I will be interested to see like what she does from here. There are other characters that are introduced that are also going to be kind of her team. Leigh Bardugo likes team stories. She likes to bring together this band of co-workers that are interesting, and I don't know. I look forward to seeing whether we'll get a few more key players to join the group and move forward on this mission to find out what happened to Darlington. I'm kind of excited for that. I'm kind of glad that I did wait a bit to read this book now that I know that there's going to be a second one, so that the wait for the second book won't seem as torturous as if I had read it when it was first released. And this book was released in October of 2019, so it's been a year since its release. So I'm glad I waited a year, because hopefully I'll only have to wait maybe a year more. It seems like a really long time, but maybe I have to wait like a year to find out what happens in the next book. This definitely is for fans who like more dark fantasy and more urban fantasy, because there's definitely the contemporary feel of the book. It is happening in current times, so it's not historical in any way, shape, or form. If you like paranormal stuff, this is for you. If you like light horror and maybe a touch of gore with the horror, maybe a touch, it's not too bad. You'll probably enjoy this one. I like that it blended so many genres, because there is like the mystery element, okay, like what happened with the co-ed and what's happening with the societies and what happened with Alex. Like there were so many like mysterious threads. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, having like this mystery touch along with the light horror and the fantasy elements and the contemporary setting. Like, I just loved getting that all blended together. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, that was a satisfying, solid read that I would definitely recommend to other readers. If you only like your fantasy high and epic, then you're probably not going to enjoy this one. But if you're like me and you like all sorts of fantasy, then you will probably enjoy Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. That's it for this video. I will see you next time. Bye.